just ask you a few more questions about this, about the report you were asking the superintendent to provide you. Did you believe she could produce this report?
Yes.
Were you aware of her producing this report for other entities?
Yes.
And what other entities had she produced it for?
It was a state agency whose name I can't recall. I don't remember that, but they required certain information, and it was similar to the kind that I was requesting. And information was also placed on the web, on the school system web, for the most part.
Was Nancy Jester a school board member who served with you?
Yes.
Did Ms. Jester place on the internet some information regarding Dr. Atkinson being able to produce this report?
Yes, she did.
And did you become aware of that?
Yes.
Did Ms. Jester support your request for this information?
Your
Yes,
Honor,
she
we're
did.
going to object to that.
Why?
It's hearsay in terms of what Ms. Jester said or stated to the witness.
Well,
Your response?
I asked if she supported his request, and I don't think that's hearsay, and I do think it's very relevant because one of the issues was whether this was a dysfunctional board, and it goes to the question of whether or not they were able to get along, and whether this issue was that he's been criticized for pursuing was one that other board members supported him on.
Except that he's not answering it in the context of a vote in front of the school board. She actually prefaced, and I apologize, Your Honor, I should have objected before. She's talking about blog entries that the former board member made about this issue. So that's hearsay, and whether or not she supported former Chairman Walker in that regard is also hearsay.
I sustain the objection.
Okay. So after, did Ms. Atkinson ever come back to you or the board and try to change the policy?
Yes.
When did
Not to the board, but she wrote and suggested that the policy needed to be changed.
Did she ever, in fact, initiate the process for changing the policy?
If she did, I'm not aware of it.
So did you all ever receive any reports consistent with the policy?
No, I did not.
Now, if we turn to Exhibit 25, I believe, I'm sorry, Exhibit 24, which is the SACS report dated from October 2012. Dr. Walker, are you aware that in the SACS report, you were criticized for requesting this information from Superintendent Atkinson?
Yes.
And if you would look specifically at page 5 of the report, the very last paragraph.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to ask you if the very first sentence, which reads, "The board chair requested a report to document compliance with the policy," is that an accurate assessment of what you requested?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, when this goes on to say that you made a unilateral and arbitrary decision to set a new lower floor for purchases for which the superintendent needed to submit a report. Did that happen?
No.
Did anyone from SACS ask you about this incident?
Yes.
And do you recall who interviewed you from SACS?
The chief legal counsel was one of them, the gentleman that was here.
And anyone else?
And there were two other females, and I do not recall their name.
When they asked you about the policy, what did you tell them?
I told them that I was requesting information based on a policy. And this was information I felt we needed both individually and as a board to ensure the public that we were spending tax dollars for educational purposes and that we were being transparent. And the lady that was interviewing me suggested that I was, in her opinion, being dogmatic. And I suggested to her that if she felt I was being dogmatic, trying to find out if money was being spent for educational purposes and to ensure transparency for the public, then I guess she would just have to label me dogmatic.
Now, the statements that SACS makes in its reports about you not trying to change the policy, would you have wanted to try to change the policy?
No, I would not, and I made that clear, and I expressed my disappointment to SACS. I told them I thought they would be commending me for trying to get the administration to follow a board policy, rather than trying to make excuses as to why the policy shouldn't be followed.
Now, around the same time that you were requesting for this documentation regarding the spending of funds, did you receive any complaints from members of the community about the superintendent?
Yes, I did.
And what type of complaints did you receive?
There were anonymous complaints, and they were complaining that money was being spent to consultants who were friends, same way they talk about us hiring people who were friends and relatives of the superintendent, and they were being overpaid, and they were being paid for services that somebody else performed, and they used examples of a gentleman who had recently left, and I was assuring them that that was not happening in our school system, and I could demonstrate that to them as soon as I got the information.
Okay, and I'd like for you to look at what's it's been marked as Exhibit 2. Dr. Walker, do you recognize this email?
It was one of the emails that came to me.
Do you know who sent this email to you?
No, I do not.
Did you review the contents of this email?
Yes.
As a result of reviewing the contents of this email, did it cause you to take any actions in regards to how you interacted with the superintendent?
No, I just shared the information with the superintendent and let her know these are the kinds of inquiries and complaints I had been receiving. And we needed to be totally transparent so people would know that this type of thing did not happen in our system.
And is that something you did whenever you received complaints from the community about the superintendent?
I shared each one of them with the superintendent.
Yana, I'd like to move for Exhibit 2, the petitioner's Exhibit 2, to be admitted into the record.
And Exhibit 2 is?
The anonymous email from a retired DeKalb educator. That's how it's signed, Your Honor.
What's the AG's position?
We object, Your Honor. It's hearsay. It's anonymous hearsay. There's no indication as to going to the veracity of the email. To be fair, I'm not sure why counsel is seeking to admit it, because petitioner has just stated that he didn't rely on it, change his course of conduct because of it. So we would also go to relevance as to why it's being admitted.
Well, I think it goes to how he responded to the email itself, which was to pass it on to the superintendent, which according to SACS would have been the appropriate course of action.
He's testified to that, Your Honor.
I'm inclined to sustain the objection. I'm real leery of email. It's a slippery slope there, and the witnesses, explained that there was an email, and I'm going to sustain the objection.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I mean, there's always exceptions that I like to stay away from email because it's just so. I mean, it's just all the issues that it touches on us.
Okay.
Relevancy and foundation and hearsay and so.
Okay, Mr. Dr. Walker, I'd like to move on to in fact, I'd like to go back to August of 2012 when you all received a letter from SACS informing you that they were going to come in and conduct a special review. Do you recall that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, when you received this letter from SACS, did you, in your position as chair of the board, take any action to talk to your fellow board members about responding to their letter?
I sent out an email to board members. I spoke to the superintendent, and I telephoned people. We dialogued about it.
And did your dialogue, did that include talking to Superintendent Atkinson?
Yes.
And I direct your attention to Petitioner's Exhibit 4, which the parties have stipulated will be a part of the record. Is this a memo that you sent to the superintendent?
Yes.
And what was your intent behind sending this memo to her?
Take some initiative to make certain that we make the appropriate response to SACS.
Now, in this email, it says that the board had put plans in place to act upon improving all standards. Was that something you all had done in response to their August 28th letter, or was it something you'd done earlier?
Something we had done earlier. And I suggested to you earlier, I was surprised and disappointed that we received such a letter as this, because I thought we were about to come off of advisement. I thought the March report was clear evidence that the system was in a state of continuous progress and that we were working well with SACS. So when I received this letter and heard about it, I was very disappointed.
So when SACS told you you needed to work on certain things, did you try to comply with what they asked you to do?
We very rigorously sought to comply with what SACS asked us to do, because we realized the harm of losing accreditation.
I'm sorry I interrupted you. And did you comply even though you may not have agreed with some of their findings?
We didn't agree with hardly any of their findings, but we felt the suggested required actions would make us a better board. And we stipulated that to the state. We expressed that to Dr. Elgott. We want to be a better board, and working on those required actions to improve our fiscal accounting, our communication, and just develop better relations and the chain of command. We feel strongly that doing this properly would help us be a more efficient board.
Okay. I want to ask you about some of the specific allegations that SACS made in their October report. So I'm looking at Exhibit 24, page 4 of the report. And one of the specific allegations they made, without identifying anyone, was that board members would demand that staff make special school assignments for students based upon athletic demands of a school within their district. Did you ever do that?
No.
Did you ever hear of any other school board member doing that?
No.
In the report, also on page 4 at the top of the report, it says that there was a consistent division on the current board. Would you agree that that's an accurate representation of the board?
Not a consistent division. There were consistent disagreements. We had disagreements on a regular basis. But the reconciliation of those disagreements was the final vote that was taken on any issue. We didn't have hardly 100% agreement on any issue we discussed. But in terms of division, that would be a little hard for me.
So y'all were 5-4 allotted.
And 6-3, 7-2, I can't recall a 9-0 vote hardly.
Okay. And did any administrator ever bring to you, did the superintendent ever bring to you the issue that school board members were trying to interfere with school assignments?
No, ma'am, never.
On page 5 of the report, it says that the school board members, a school board member had told the principal that she had her back on a recent decision by the principal. Are they talking about something you did?
No, ma'am.
Are you aware of who they may be referring to?
No, ma'am.
Did anyone, the superintendent or any other administration official, come to you with this type of concern or
No.
this issue?
No.
They also say there was a consistent pattern of direct communication between school-level staff and board members. Do you know what they're referring to?
I know it didn't include me.
Now, they also talk about a issue with the Coralwood bus route. Are you familiar with that issue?
Yes, ma'am.
Was Coralwood in your district?
No.
And could you briefly tell us what the issue was about?
The issue involved a bus route for children with special needs for the most part. And there was some concerns about that route and whether or not it met those needs. But the resolution of that issue, which was raised in the community, was made by recommendations from the staff. The staff, and working with the superintendent based on the concern board members from that area had brought to the superintendent, came back with a recommendation, and that recommendation led to the modification of the transportation framework that had been put in place.
So the school board members did not change the transportation plan that was in place, is that correct?
No, and it didn't cost the system one extra penny to make the change. The staff took all the initiative, and the staff brought the recommendation back. It did not add any additional cost, and they were able to accommodate the concerns of the community in reference to their children.
Now, there's also a claim in the report that approximately $12 million, that the district spent approximately $12 million for new textbooks, yet numerous interviews revealed that no one could identify any school that had received new textbooks. Are you aware of that claim that SACS made?
I'm aware of that claim. I'm aware of the rumors surrounding that claim. And I'm also aware that whoever started those rumors and brought that claim forward had not talked to the people in charge of that area.
And when you say you're aware of those rumors, did you hear the rumors prior to the report coming out?
Not, I don't remember. You had something in the KPMG report that I don't know, my dates, I'm confused on my dates. I don't know whether the SACS report came first or the KPMG report.
Okay. And were you concerned about this issue when you read it in the report?
Well, I was concerned to the extent that the rumor itself was creating very negative imagery about the school system. But I had enough confidence in our staff to believe that we had no such mix-up as that. And that was born true.
And when you say it was born true, how was it born true?
Well, the staff is subsequent to these negative, erroneous reports, documented that that there was no such mix-up in funds.
They also allege in this report, and you said that they documented that there was no mix-up in funds, but were you able to document that the textbooks were purchased and sent to the schools?
Right. They documented from A to Z that the textbooks were purchased, they were adequately and appropriately distributed to the schools, and in the process, as we understand it, none of the people who were making those reports had spoken to the individuals in charge of textbooks, nor the finance department.
One of the other claims that SACS made is that there was an attitude among some of the board members in regards to expenditures that you would find the additional money somewhere instead of planning for the long term. Is that something that you believe?
No,
Is that something you ever expressed to anybody?
no.
Now, the report also claims that board members intimidated staff. Is that something you ever engaged in, intimidating members of the staff?
No, ma'am.
Did anyone ever come to you with a claim that you had intimidated them?
No, ma'am. Never.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the email that we've previously discussed where that you sent to Dr. Atkinson on August 24th, 2012, and it's at Petitioner's Exhibit number 3.
Okay.
Are you familiar, do you recognize the email that's at Petitioner's Exhibit number 3?
You says 23?
Number 3, I'm sorry, number 3.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you send this email to Dr. Atkinson?
Yes, ma'am.
And how did it come about that you sent this email to her?
The board secretary, whose brother I had met and thought well of, who had recently lost his job, was interested in trying to become a teacher. And I was impressed with the individual. So the secretary asked me if I would bring him to the attention of the superintendent. And I did that and wrote a note to the superintendent asking her, based on what was in the young man's resume, if he might qualify for the TAP program, Teacher Alternative Program, where he could eventually become a candidate for employment.
Now, at the time you sent this email, did you understand that the CAP program was a certification program?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand that he first needed to be hired as a teacher in order to
No, I didn't know he
qualify?
had to be hired. I was trying to find out if he would qualify for the program.
So did you find out today that he had to first be hired as a teacher in order to be a part of
Yes.
the program?
Yeah.
So were you advocating that this young man be hired as a teacher in the DeKalb County?
Of all
school
the
system?
time the superintendent was in our employ, this is the first and only individual I ever sent a notice to asking if they might consider one of our, not two, I sent two, one other person. And and the first one didn't get considered, and the second one, I don't even know today whether this gentleman got into the TAP program.
So, just to be clear, did you, when you sent this email to Dr. Atkinson, were you asking her to hire him as a teacher or
No.
for him to be a part of the TAP program?
To be a part of the TAP program.
And is it correct that at the time you sent the email, you didn't understand that the TAP program was something for people who had been hired as
No,
teachers?
I did not.
Now, attached to this email is a resume.
I sent the resume too.
And that has been redacted, just for the record. And based on reviewing the young man's background, did you think he was qualified for the
Not
program?
only with his educational credentials, but I was very much impressed with the demeanor and behavior of the young man. I met him, and I thought he would be a great asset to our system. And I gladly sent that letter to the superintendent. Now, she may not have had the same opinion as I, but I took great pride in sending that to her.
And in the letter, in the email that you sent to her, you stated that he was the brother of the board secretary. Why did you put that in the document?
I wanted them to know who it was and total disclosure. And let me clear it up. The secretary was of no relations to me. None.
Okay. back to the SACS report. In their report, they say in part that the young man, please know that I have met the young man and he is the brother of one of our board. Does that accurately reflect what you had placed in the email, what you had stated in the email?
It doesn't to me. It's just based on what they said after that I was trying to get some employment for a board member.
Did you, after you sent this email, did you follow up with Dr. Atkinson about whether this young man had been employed?
No.
Did you have any further conversations
No.
with anyone
No one.
about the young man? Now, we heard some testimony earlier that you have family members who work for the DeKalb County School District. Is that correct?
Yes.
And do you know how many family members you have who work for the DeKalb County School District?
I don't know the exact number, but I have a lot of family members who work for the county.
Do you have a lot of family members who live in DeKalb County?
That's my home.
And how long have you lived there?
A long time. Asking me the dates. Cut me out to
Not a problem. And do you have a lot of family members who are educators?
Yes.
So if you would turn to Exhibit 15 of the petitioner's exhibits.
Yes, ma'am.
Does this accurately reflect the family members you have who work in the DeKalb County School District?
I believe so. I can't think of anyone else.
Now, according to this document, none of your family members are principals. Is that correct?
That's correct.
None of them are assistant principals. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And of all the individuals on this list, only one person is a teacher. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Your Honor, I would object at this point. The counsel is leading the witness. She's got him on direct. She doesn't have him on cross.
Oops, sorry.
Well, try to do better.
Okay, I'll try. Do any of your family members hold positions of authority in the DeKalb County School District?
I feel very strongly that each one of them hold responsible positions within the system that's in the system. But if you mean if they're in top administration, I can see where one of my brother-in-laws is an executive director of athletics. And that's the only one I see here in administrative position.
Okay. And did you influence the hiring of any of your relatives who are in the DeKalb County School District?
Not a one.
Are you aware of the perception that SACS talks about of the hiring of friends and family in the school district?
Very aware of it.
And is that something you've heard from people in the community before?
I hear that false perception a lot
And why do you believe it's a false perception?
because it's not true.
And is that based on your experience working in the DeKalb County school system?
Well, you can see from the list here, all of my kin were hired way before I became a member of the school board. And not a one has been hired since I've been on the school board. And I don't know of a friend. The one person that I recommended for that TAP program was not a close friend of mine. It was somebody I had just met, an individual that I thought was very capable and competent who had recently lost his job and I thought would be an asset to our system. So these rumors are totally unfounded.
And did any board member ever, are you aware of any board member having a family member hired during your tenure on the board?
Not to my knowledge, but if we had, it would have been reported and the board would have had to approve it. no board member, relative, can, at any level, even below administrative level, could be hired without the board being notified.
Do you recall receiving any such notifications?
No, ma'am, I do not.
Now, going back to the SACS report, there's another claim in this report that that board members made special requests of district office staff, bus drivers, and teachers. Did you, and threatened to fire them if they don't comply? Did you ever do any such thing?
No, and I'm not aware of any board member doing it. But more important than that, no such threat as that could become true, because board members do not hire and fire. It is amazing to me, people refuse to see the difference between board and administration. The only employee the board can hire and fire is the superintendent. Board members can't even hire their secretary. All of the staff work for the superintendent. The whole 15,000 employees work for the superintendent. So if somebody believed that a board member could intimidate them or fire them, they are totally misinformed.
Did anyone in the community ever come to you with this issue, that board members
Never.
were intimidating?
No.
Did
No,
Dr. Go ahead.
These are just rumors I've seen in SACS report and heard it when we went before the grand jury. They would say things like that. But these things are totally unfounded. We ask them, who is the board member doing that? Identify it, where we can correct it.
Does the board have the ability to reprimand board members?
Yes.
Did the superintendent ever come to you letting you know that she had heard these type of rumors?
No.
There's also a quote in this report that contends that a board member said to someone, "You don't know who I am," and implying the person would be fired. Was that you who made that statement?
I can categorically in fact say it was not me.
And do you know of anyone?
I'm not aware of
making that
anyone else
statement?
saying that. But if they said it, they couldn't do it.
Now, there's also a claim in this report that you attended a transportation workers meeting.
That is a big fabrication.
So you deny that you attended any such meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, according to the claim in the report, there was a school board member there, and the board chair remotely attended via radio. Did that happen?
I spoke on the radio. Is that what they mean by remote?
Uh-huh.
Yes, I
Yes.
spoke on the radio. I spoke on a morning show, 1380, and I corrected some misinformation. And I corrected this misinformation with the consent and encouragement of the superintendent and the director of operation, because they're the ones that helped me get the correct information for me to share with the public. And the information was, the rumor was that board members had never received any kind of raise, or transportation workers, I'm sorry, when the fact of the matter is that they had received a cost of living increase. So I went to the radio to make that report with the blessing and the encouragement of the superintendent and the director of transportation, Mr. Wilkins.
Now, the report produced by SACS says that the board chair remotely via radio conducted a discussion with the transportation staff members. Did you, via radio, conduct a discussion with the transportation staff members?
I conducted a discussion with everybody listening to the radio. I repeated on the radio that an error and misinformation had been spread, that transportation employees had not received any kind of increase, and that was wrong. They had received a cost of living increase, and I gave them the time that occurred. But I did not talk directly to anyone in any kind of a meeting. I was on the radio.
When the folks from SACS came out to interview you, did they share any email or correspondence that they've received about the board with you?
No,
Did you see any documentation regarding any of the claims about any of the things they were asking you about?
no.
Now, once you received this report from SACS, what was your response to it?
To do whatever I could to try to answer and appropriately deal with those required actions. I was disappointed in the tone and the misinformation inherent in the report, but SACS had the last word. And I was not totally opposed to trying to do the required action, because I still believe that's something that can make us a better board if we can do it properly.
Did you start talking with your fellow board members about actions you all could take to respond to the SACS recommendations?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you, after the report came out, did the superintendent remain engaged in the process of responding to the report?
I can't speak to that. I can tell you what we did do. I asked the superintendent if she would appoint Ms. Ramona Tyson as the point person to help us adequately and appropriately respond to SACS.
And do you know if any type of committee was set up as a result of your suggestion that she appoint Ms. Ramona Tyson to the point person?
We began to do a lot of things. We started talking to a lot of possible consultants. Ms. Tyson then put together some items for us, and we were still taking care of school business. And in the process of doing this, we had a smooth separation with our superintendent, and we immediately hired a new superintendent, and we just started responding. We had to go down to meet with the state board on December the 17th, I think it was. So we just had a lot of activity going on that we had to take care of.
And I'd like to refer you to what's part of Petitioner's Exhibit 14.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with this document?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know who prepared it?
It's the administration.
When you say the administration, was that the administration that was headed by
Dr. Atkinson.
Dr. Atkinson? Do you know what it was prepared in response to?
I don't know if it was a part of the annual report or if it was made in response to the SACS thing. I'm not clear on that.
Do you recall the date that you received this document?
No, ma'am.
And I'd like for you to take a look at Petitioner's Exhibit number 9.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you prepare this letter?
Yes, ma'am.
And who is it addressed to?
To Marshall and two of the board members who were concerned because they did not attend the meeting where we met with Mr. Elgar.
Okay. And if you take a quick look at this letter, does it help refresh your recollection regarding other steps you took to respond to the SACS report?
Well, it states it pretty clearly here that I began to speak to a lot of different individuals, a lot of different organizations, began talking to my board members, and we approached individuals that had been suggested as ones who might could help us in preparing an appropriate response to SACS. So we just started a lot of activity there.
Were you looking for consultants who could come in and help the school district?
especially in the area of governance.
Were the other school members on the board with you at the time committed to trying to address the problems
Every one
in
of them.
SACS?
And they gave me full support.
Also, I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit 7. This is a document dated December 19, 2012. Did you prepare this document? In your honor, petitioner's Exhibit 7, the parties have stipulated that it would be admitted into the record.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
And was this done in direct response to the SACS report?
And in response to some of the things I felt need to be done as chair to try to rally our troops and offer some direction and encouragement about what we need to do.
Now, when you, during the period that you, did Dr. Elgard ever provide you with any recommendations that were specific to you and what you should do as a board member to improve the DeKalb County School Board?
No, we had a conversation, and I expressed my personal sentiments to Dr. Elgard. I told him that I fully embraced the the actions that his company said we should develop, but I had problems with the report itself, and I promised him that I would not publicly come out at him and SACS over this issue, but I would work hard to try to answer those directives.
Now, at some point after you received the special report, did the superintendent leave her position?
Yes.
And did the board members work together in helping her transition out of the position?
It wouldn't have happened if we had not worked together.
Were you all able to replace someone in the superintendent's position?
And we think a very outstanding candidate.
And who did you all hire?
Michael Thurman.
And how did that come about?
As a result of the board working together and looking at a lot of prospects, first identifying the kind of characteristics we would need in a superintendent, and then identifying individuals that we thought matched up with those characteristics, and then directing our school attorney who worked with us in the area of personnel to start contacting these people, and we interviewed a few people, and we decided on Mr. Thurman.
Did Mr. Thurman have any specialized experience in governance and leadership issues?
We felt he did.
Now,
We felt he was accomplished. We felt that he knew how to. Let me make sure you understand. I have a pretty clear sense of my distinction between management and a board. I believe as a manager, you're responsible for the planning, the organizing, the motivating, and the managing and the operation of the system. And you need someone who's accomplished in that area. And we felt that we found one.
Now, before you were removed from the board, were you working with Mr. Thurman to respond to the issues raised by SACS?
Yes, we were.
Had SACS told you how long they thought it would take? Did you have any idea how long it would take to respond to the issues raised by SACS and see some improvement that would satisfy SACS?
We had some dates. We had to have a report in sometime in May and another one December the 31st. We knew that it would not be instant. We knew that it would take some time. We knew we had to go through the process of finding the right kind of consultant to especially help us in the area of governance. We think we were fortunate enough to find that kind of a person. So that's one of the reasons why I am applying for readmission back to the board. because I was one who helped initiate this process. And much of what we're doing and much of what we initiated is ongoing. We hired Mr. Thurman. So I'm at a loss to figure out how you can find somebody who can work better with a person we hired than the ones who hired him.
And have you had a chance to observe the actions that have been taken by the replacement board?
I'm not trying to judge the action. All I know is the things we set in place. We still have Mr. Thurman there. That's the person we hired. We still have the consultant there who's working on governance. That's a person that we recommended for hire. So I can see that ongoing. So I don't know what the new board is doing. I'll not try to address that.
Do you think the new board is doing anything different from what you would have done as a board member?
I don't know what they're doing.
Okay.
I know what I would do.
Now, if you're reinstated to the board, what steps would you take to ensure DeKalb County retains its accreditation?
Reassure our leader, Mr. Thurman, that I'm totally committed to it, and I want to help provide whatever resources we need to achieve that, and continue to offer my cooperation, and continue to respect the chain of command, and help him be the kind of planner and organizer and motivator of the staff that a superintendent should be.
Do you think you're in a position to help DeKalb County attain full accreditation?
Yes, I do.
And why do you think you're in a position to do that?
Because I've already taken the steps to lead us in that direction. I was on the point in the hiring of the superintendent that we have. I was also one of the persons who looked at the many consultants we interviewed. I don't know if the new board has interviewed any consultants. I just don't know what they're doing, but I know what we did, and I know what needs to be done.
I don't have any additional questions at this time.
Cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, as a preliminary matter, because we'll be touching on many of these in the cross-examination, the parties have stipulated, and I realize that petitioner has had some issues with stipulation. I'm worried that it may be something in the water, so I apologize if we end up having some of the same issues. But we've stipulated to the admissibility of tab 1 in the state's exhibit, which is the Advanced Ed Accreditation Policies and Procedures. We've stipulated to the admissibility of tab 2, Advanced Ed Standards for Quality. We've stipulated for the admission of the January 24th through 26th, 2011 Advanced Ed Report of the Special Review Team, which is tab 3. We have stipulated to the admissibility of the March 4th through March 7th, 2012 Advanced Ed Report of the Quality Assurance Review Team, which is tab 4. We have stipulated to the admissibility of the October 17th through the 19th, 2012 Advanced Ed Report of the Quality Assurance Review Team, which is tab 5. We have stipulated as to tab 8, the recommendation of the State Board of Education to the Governor dated February 21st, 2013. We've stipulated as to tab 9, the hearing transcript before the State Board of Education dated January 17th, 2013. We've stipulated as to the admissibility of tab 10, the hearing transcript before the State Board of Education dated February 21st, 2013. And we have stipulated to tab 11, the institutional progress report prepared by the DeKalb County School District for Advanced Ed dated May 3rd, 2013. The remaining items have not been stipulated to.
That's correct, Your Honor. And in regards to exhibits, states exhibits 9 and 10, I believe we agreed that the exhibits that go along with the hearing transcript should also be submitted so the record will be complete.
We have no objection to that, Your Honor. We agree to that stipulation.
We can't reach a stipulation on the grand jury presentment of
We
tab
have not,
12?
but I'm going to address that right now, Your Honor.
All right.
Your Honor, I have,
Counsel, why can't we stipulate to a grand jury?
Well,
We're not
I-
stipulating just admissibility.
I guess it's a relevance issue, Your Honor. One of the grand jury presentments, I believe it was one person from the school board who appeared. My client didn't appear, and I believe that's the first one. And neither of these documents includes the response. And if they are admitted, we would certainly like the opportunity to include the response that was sent to those documents. But I believe it's the first one. I don't believe my client was even present. I believe Tom Bowens, who was the then representative for the school board, he went. The second one, my client was there, but as to the first one, he was not. And neither of those contained the response to the presentment.
Well, I can tell you right now, I mean, I'm going to consider a grand jury presentment.
Your Honor,
Objections noted, but it's clearly relevant to me.
we've got exemplified copies. They are not reflected in the tabs. If the court would like me to present the exemplified copies from the clerk of Superior Court in DeKalb County.
And counsel for petitioner can certainly should be entitled to present any response to either one of the grand jury presentments.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
What exhibit numbers on those?
And I'm sorry, the DeKalb County grand jury presentment for March and April 2012 term is tab 7. And the DeKalb County grand jury presentment for the November-December 2011 term is tab 12. And my understanding is you've admitted those in evidence,
Yes,
Your Honor.
yes, yes. Over objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, and maybe I will dispose of the last tab if I can approach the witness.
All right. The last tab being,
The KPMG audit.
oh, you mean the unstipulated tab.
Correct.
Okay.
Dr. Walker, do you recognize that document?
I don't know, is this the first one or the second one?
I'm sorry, this is, if I may approach the witness.
Yes, yes.
There were two. Is this the first one or the second one? If it's the second one, that's the one.
This is the audit report that came to Superintendent Atkinson dated December 7th, 2012. This is the final KPMG audit report. You recognize that document?
If it's the second one, yes.
All right. Was it prepared at the request of the DeKalb County School System?
Yes.
Was it prepared in the normal course of business in auditing the finances of the DeKalb County School System?
Objection, I don't believe this witness is in a position to know that.
I'm sorry, he
didn't
was
prepare
board
the
chair at the
report.
time.
He didn't prepare the report. He's not a accountant. How would he
No.
know?
I'm asking if the request was made
Oh, it's
for
a
the DeKalb
request.
County School System to have the report auditing their finances.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood your question.
All right. Your Honor, we would seek to have this admitted as a business record of the DeKalb County School System after they receive the report.
Your Honor, I object to this report. There's been one of the threshold issues under the new rules of evidence in Georgia is that there has to be a level of trustworthiness and reliability of the report. There's been no showing from anyone who's actually involved in producing this report that it was trustworthy or reliable. In fact, there's been testimony from the very first witness today that some of the things, at least one of the issues in the report, may not be reliable and trustworthy in regards to the textbook issue. If they want to have this admitted under the business records exception, this is not the witness for them to lay a foundation in order to do that.
Actually, Your Honor, I would argue that he is a witness who is capable. There may be other witnesses who are, but he is a witness who is capable of answering. In terms of the accuracy of the report, that goes to the weight to be given the evidence, not to the admissibility of the evidence.
Objection is noted and overruled. The
Thank you, Your
document
Honor.
is submitted in evidence.
If I may approach the witness?
Yes.
Get it back. Your Honor, that takes care of tab 6, and all of the state's tabs in its exhibit folder have now been admitted into evidence.
All right.
Dr. Walker, I apologize that we got that out of the way to start with. I'm Russ Willard. I think you've heard me introduce myself several times. I represent the state in this proceeding. I want to clarify something, and I know you've got experience both in working with state agencies as well as working with the legislature, and you're aware that there are different boards have different mechanisms, and I just want to clarify the chain of command at the outset. As you're probably aware, the State Board of Transportation actually has a direct hire and a direct report, not only for the commissioner, but I think there's also the chief engineer, the chief financial officer, there may be one other individual, and then a board secretary who are actually hired directly by the board, and they report directly to the board, whereas other boards either are reliant totally upon departmental staff or may get one hire. It's your testimony today that the only direct hire and direct report from the DeKalb County Board of Education is the superintendent.
Yes.
Correct? Board secretaries, everybody else goes through, falls under the superintendent.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that for the record. You've testified in response to your counsel's questions regarding what has been marked and admitted in as respondents exhibits 3, 4, and 5. These are the SACS reports for January of 2011, March of 2012, and October of 2012.
Yes, sir.
All right. You testified on direct examination that there were no issues of board governance and leadership identified in either the January 24th, 2011 report or the March 2012 SACS report. Was that your testimony?
I don't know what you mean by no governance issues. What are you saying? What are you?
In response to a question from your counsel, you said, I've read through the report, and none of these findings deal with board governance or leadership.
No,
Is
if
that
you
correct?
heard me correctly, I said none of the findings I'm aware of dealt with finances.
No, I think your counsel asked you about leadership and governance. If we have the opportunity.
I think the council asked me if there were standards in there referencing leadership and governance.
And then asked you if any findings related to leadership and governance. I mean, we can go back to the transcript.
Yeah, I wish you would, because I'm not aware of what you're talking about.
So you're agreeing then that there are some findings in the report that dealt with the SACS standard dealing with leadership and governance.
No, you're losing me. Let me tell you what I am aware of.
Okay.
I'm aware of the March 3rd and 4th report of the Quality Assurance Committee. And I'm aware of them assessing the 7 standards. And the DeKalb school system met 4 and was emerging in 3. They were operational in 4 and emerging in 3. And they had all 7 of the standards there. And I'm assuming in each other report they had the 7 standards there. So leadership and governance, they are part of the 7 standards. So and in every SACS visit, they have addressed the standards one way or another.
But I'm asking you to clarify, because apparently you're backtracking a little off your direct testimony. Are you saying that there were issues of leadership and governance identified by SACS in the January 2011 and the March 2012 report? Are you saying that y'all passed with flying colors? And in fact, I think you and your counsel used the term commendation on the issue of leadership and governance.
We had a number of commendations. So when you say issues with governance, I don't know what kind of value you want me to place on that.
Were there any findings that you failed to meet the standards for leadership and governance?
I can't recall. I don't know.
Okay. Do you still have what has been tabbed as petitioners 23, 24, and 25, I believe?
I can look at it. I have which one want we look at, sir?
I'm sorry, 24, 25, and 26.
Let's go ahead and release Ms. Tyson. We're not going to get to her tonight.
That's fine, Your Honor. We've actually authenticated the one document that we wanted to get
All right,
in.
would you
in her
communicate to her she's free to leave and thank her? We'll see her Friday at 10.
At 10 o'clock, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right.
If you would go to page 12.
And which one's that?
I'm sorry, this is tab 26, I believe, in your exhibits. The advance ed report dated January 24th and 26th, 2011.
And page 12, that resources and support system.
Actually, the page 12 I have begin, strategic plan as a blueprint for success is the continuation of the sentence from page 11. And then item 2, implement protocol.
On page 12 of 31,
No, page 12 of exhibit 26.
okay?
And it starts strategic plan as the blueprint for
I'm sorry,
success.
I have page 13, from 11 to 13, I don't have
That's
page.
what I've got, 11 to 13.
Actually, that's what I have also.
Like I said, we're not going to skip this.
It's your exhibit.
Well, actually, he's looking at petitioner's exhibit.
That's what I mean, yeah.
But I
Yeah.
thought I copied it from them.
I have page,
Apologize, Your Honor, I'm having trouble getting the binder open. That's the sort of day we're all
It is
having
late
here.
today, isn't it?
Yeah. And Your Honor, we'll provide on Friday the missing.
Yeah,
pages.
we'll use Thursday to tighten up
Thank you, Your Honor.
the
If I may
voluminous
approach the witness.
documentation. Yes.
Dr. Walker,
yes,
if you would please read the bolded text for item 2 and item 3.
okay. You want me to read them aloud?
After you familiarize yourself with the language, if you would read them aloud, Dr. Walker.
On number 2, the bold print.
Bold print on number 2.
Implement protocol within the current comprehensive policy review initiative process that will provide proactive and ongoing review of policy following its completion in 2 years. Number 3, develop a plan to ensure the communication, training, implementation, and monitoring of all district policies and regulations. Are these the direct
Those are the required actions.
required actions?
If I may approach the witness again. Dr. Walker, are you aware that items 2 and items 3 fall within the site standards for leadership and governance?
If you say so, yes, sir. I don't know the exact items on each one. I know they indicated and they have them there, so I don't doubt what you're saying. Yes, sir.
All right. If you would turn to exhibit 25, and petitioner, I'm sorry, 24. No. Yes, you did it in reverse chronological order. You would turn to exhibit 25. That should be the advance ed report dated March 2012 in the petitioner's exhibit.
Yes. I have.
All right, if you would turn to page 16 at the top.
I have it. Teaching and learning.
Should be a continuation of a sentence on district initiatives.
On page 16 of 31.
Your Honor, and I think that's the difficulty of trying to deal with petitioner's exhibit and respondent's exhibit. If I may approach the witness again.
Sure.
you read the paragraph that begins with finding? You'd read it aloud after you've had an opportunity to familiarize yourself with the language.
Well, I think this, I have this page, 16 of 31. It's not, I have this page. Finding. Based on evidence reviewed, the quality assurance review team has assigned the overall assessment level of emerging, indicating that the DeKalb County School District has not met the accreditation requirement for the governance and leadership standards.
All right. So to clarify, and we differ on what your prior testimony was, but to clarify, SACS has identified in both the January 2011 report and the March 2012 report that y'all have issues and have not met the standards for governance and leadership.
Right, they said we were emerging.
Right, which the corollary of that means have not met the standard.
I agree.
Okay.
Excuse me, can I, it
Yes,
means
you
we
can.
have continuous progress, the way I interpreted it.
But you had work to do, is that your
A
understanding?
lot of work to do.
We're going to go to tab 24 now in Petitioner's Exhibit. And reference page 5 of that special team report for the October 2012 visit.
I'm there.
This is what you and your council focused on in regards to a report from the superintendent regarding compliance with board policy. Do you understand, based on the email correspondence from the superintendent, that you were requesting a report from her that the system and its computer system was not capable of generating?
I did not understand that and still do not believe that. And I thought I made that clear. And I thought I made clear the fact that that policy was proposed by the administration and it was on the table for 30 days. And I also thought I testified that the kind of information I was requesting had already been produced in another fashion. So I was not convinced that the information could not be produced. And initially, if you would look at the emails, you would see the initial response was that the information would be forthcoming, but it never did arrive.
I understand that, Dr. Walker, but you would admit that the superintendent ultimately wrote you and said after reviewing the accounting software, they were not capable of generating a report. They don't capture the information, thus they would not be able to generate a report
Right.
giving you the information you
Right.
requested.
I'm familiar with that.
And your testimony is today you don't believe the superintendent.
That's correct.
At some point while you were board chair, did the superintendent leave?
I'm sorry, sir.
During your service on the board, did Superintendent Atkinson leave?
Yes.
And you hired interim superintendent Thurman?
Yes, sir.
Did you begin getting the reports at that point?
We never did request the reports anymore. We were trying to address the issues SACS had put on us about these required directives. So I didn't ask for that report anymore.
So you
Because
have,
the superintendent was not hiring any more consultants.
all right, so you have no evidence to indicate that the Superintendent Atkinson was lying to you, other than your personal belief and your frustration at her for not generating these
You're
reports?
absolutely correct.
Okay. You testified earlier that there were 4 levels of accreditation from SACS.
Yes, sir.
Accredited accredited on advisement, accredited warning, accredited on probation, loss of accreditation. There's actually a 5th, and that's full accreditation.
Thank you for that correction.
Well, that's correct.
Yes, sir.
Okay. During your time as chairman of the board, DeKalb County did not attain full accreditation. In fact, it moved from level 1, accredited on warning, to accredited on probation, which is one level removed from loss of accreditation. Isn't that true?
No, sir, not to my knowledge. I've never been aware of us being on accredited warning.
I'm sorry, accredited on advisement. I apologize, Dr. Walker, you're correct. During your time as board chairman, SACS moved you from the first level, accredited on advisement, to accredited on probation, which is one step removed from loss of accreditation. Is that correct?
And one step jump over warning. Yes, sir, that's correct.
Right.
We never received a warning.
When your system was placed on accredited on advisement, what level of urgency did you place to that?
A significant amount, because I wanted full accreditation, and I was totally committed to it, still am. And I felt real good when we had our March report, and I thought we were coming off of it. We had been getting, if you will recall, great accolades with our interim superintendent being in charge, Mr. Ramona Tyson, and I thought we had really met all of the required actions. And I was disappointed when we only got 4 out of 7 and stayed on advisement, but I thought in very short order we would get those other 3 and go to full accreditation.
What as a board were you doing to meet all those required actions to come off of accredited on advisement?
Supporting every initiative the superintendent came up with except one. Every one of them except one.
What was that?
A request for reduction in force.
Okay. Were you aware that SACS had indicated a need for a nepotism policy?
And we were working on one, which we already had one, but they wanted us to come up with something different. And that's what our policy committee was working on, along with the staff.
Actually, didn't you have a conflict of interest policy as opposed to a nepotism policy?
See, and that they were reconciling those two. I think they combined the two, working on conflict of interest and nepotism, and I think they had them together. I'm not certain, because I think they came up with a new nepotism policy after I left.
Right. Let's follow up on that. Your system is placed on accredited on advisement in January of 2011. You have an interim report in March of 2012 that says you're still on accredited on advisement. One of the main issues that they've identified is your lack of a nepotism policy.
No, you're absolutely wrong, sir. The thing and from my recollection, and I stand corrected, I'd be happy if you do, they said we needed an auditor, and we had to reconcile how that auditor would pass, and we needed a chain of command policy. I was not aware of anything involving nepotism, and if it's in there, I would appreciate you pointing it out to me. An auditor and the chain of command are the two that I recall.
So when did you begin working on the proposed nepotism policy?
When all of these unfounded rumors came up, like the one they accused me of sending a letter to hire the board secretary that they said was my daughter, which was not true, and all of these unfounded rumors that we got hiring friends and family when there's no evidence of any of that.
Well, now, and let's for a moment focus on the email correspondence regarding, I'm assuming it's Mr. Francois.
Yeah, Ms. Franco.
Mrs. Francois, I believe, is the board secretary, but the person that you were touting is a Mr. Francois, correct?
No, there was a brother who.
Well, then it would
she
be a
was
Mr.
married. Yeah, it wasn't the same name.
Oh, okay. The email attachment with the resume was listed Francois. That's why I was asking. You indicated on direct examination that you forwarded his email over to the superintendent because he would be, quote, an asset for the system.
I felt very strongly that he would.
In other words, you thought he should be hired by the system.
No, I thought he should be considered for that TAP program to see if he could get the certification to be hired by the system.
So
I didn't know
ultimately,
he had to be hired before he could get at the tap pro. That was something new to me. I just found out tonight.
fair enough. But to be an asset for the system, he's got to be hired by the system.
Right.
Okay.
And I was hoping that that kind of person would meet the qualifications to be hired.
Okay. It's your testimony, well, I'll leave it open-ended. Did DeKalb County school system have a problem with employing friends and family members of board members?
Never to my knowledge. These are rumors that I hear, and no one can identify the friends and family that they're talking about.
Going back to our previous colloquy about the prior SACS reports, and I think this is, I've got to do the math because y'all listed them in reverse order. I think this is tab 26. This is the January 2011 report, page 11.
Oh, you remember I don't have it.
No, you didn't have
I didn't have
page
13.
12.
Okay, I have 11, so.
First full paragraph beginning with, there was a previously sustained culture of employing family, friends, and fraternity members that plagued the DeKalb County school system as expressed in stakeholder interviews.
So what am I supposed to, I'm not aware of that, sir.
So you didn't read the report that placed you on accredited on
No, but
advisement.
the operative word here is that these were rumors of a sustained culture here. That I'm not aware of any culture of hiring friends and families and rumors. These are rumors.
Well, I don't want to argue with you, Dr. Walker, but there is no qualification in that sentence, is there, in terms of any rumors. It says there was a culture.
Well, what is it? Who are the friends and family that have been hired?
Dr. Walker, and to be blunt, I'm trying to get at what actions you took as a board member when you're put on notice that the boys and girls in the DeKalb County school system are about to lose their accreditation because of your failure to adopt a nepotism policy that will impact their ability to get scholarships, that will impact their ability to get into the colleges and universities of their choice. And you're coming back to, it's a perception. How do you justify that as the board chair?
Simple and easy. I ask you, sir, where's your evidence? I'm not going to just ask on something because you say it. I would like for you to show me. Where is the evidence to show that the DeKalb school system is engaged in a process of hiring family and friend? I need to be able to see it. It's beyond that, it's nothing but rumor.
It's not rumor anymore, Dr. Walker, is it not? When it's in the SACS report placing you on a lower level of accreditation than the
But sir, I'm suggesting your SACS report got to be credible too. It can't just utter statements and not have something to corroborate it.
Well, let's follow up on that, Dr. Walker. Wasn't one of the required actions of SACS that you adopt a nepotism policy to address this finding?
The required action of SACS was that we adopt a whole host of policy, and I think it is healthy for us to adopt a nepotism policy. And we need to define what nepotism is.
Isn't it true, though, after being put on notice in January of 2011 that you needed to adopt a nepotism policy, you were removed in March of 2013 as a member of the school board, having never adopted a nepotism policy, but the new board, consisting of the replacement members, adopted a nepotism policy within 2 months of being appointed to the board?
No, you're figuring things the way you want them to be. We did not have any urgency to adopt a nepotism policy. I repeat to you, we already had a nepotism policy. And you can easily correct that, validate that, by looking to the policies of the DeKalb County school system. And if you don't feel like doing it, I'll look it up for you. The DeKalb school system has had a nepotism policy ever since Dr. Freeman was superintendent. So, sir, we have had a nepotism policy. Now, it may need to be modified. People may not have liked the way it was, but you're in significant error when you say we did not have a nepotism policy.
So you're testifying that it was sufficient to have the policy that Dr. Reed testified about earlier today, and that is you could not hire the family of cabinet members for principal or above positions without a vote of the school board, that was a sufficient nepotism policy in place. The conflict of interest policy that was in place for the DeKalb County School Board was sufficient, where all you had to do was vote on the principal or above position of family members of cabinet members.
So it was very sufficient to me. Very sufficient to me, because we have no evidence of the practice you are alluding to. And I ask you again, you won't hurt anybody if you name them. Where does the nepotism exist?
Dr. Walker, SACS has identified this to you. Are you also...
No, SACS is saying this. They have not identified a thing.
They've identified a finding. Would you also agree that the grand jury reports, which have been admitted into evidence, also identified the friends and family culture in hiring in the DeKalb County school system as a problem?
The grand jury did not even go as far as SACS misrepresent what happened by using me. The grand jury didn't even have an example. So they are both propelling rumors that do not have substance and fact. And that's all I'm asking you to do. We don't have what you say exists, sir.
Let's move on. We really
Well,
circles here.
Well, and I would simply ask, are you aware in the grand jury report that Superintendent Atkinson testified to the grand jury that one of the issues that must be addressed was the friends and family mentality of hiring and contract bidding?
She never brought that to me.
Okay. I'll move on, Your Honor. You've self-identified 9 members of your immediate family that have worked for the DeKalb County school system, correct? That includes a son, a daughter-in-law, 2 brothers-in-law, 3 nieces, a nephew, and a granddaughter. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Still your testimony that there wasn't a problem employing friends and family of board members?
What is the problem in that? They're all qualified, eminently qualified, doing a very credible job, and the system, I hope, is proud to have them. Is there a problem somewhere, sir? Just because they are members of my family who were hired long before I got on the board, is that a problem? Is that what you're saying?
Are you aware that the SACS report, and I'm referring specifically to the October 2012 SACS report, where they interviewed decision makers in the school system, that those interviews revealed that there have been instances where promotions were given to individuals who are highly favored by a board member and not based on merit or qualification?
I'm totally unconvinced of that, and more importantly, there's no evidence of it. And board members do not hire and fire. You're confusing the board with the administration. All hiring takes place with the administration. All of the people that the superintendent hired and terminated was the sole act of the superintendent.
Well, let's cycle back around to the board secretary.
Yeah.
You sent an email to the one individual who you hired and fired, the superintendent, and said, I think this is a qualified applicant. That doesn't pose a problem in your mind?
No, for the TAP program, no. And not all of that, sir. If I'm put back on the board, if I find some other people I think are qualified, I bring them to the attention of the superintendent. That, I think, is a part of my responsibility. We want great people in the system. And I thought this was a great person. I can't dictate that they hire him, but we need to raise up anybody we think should be considered.
Was there an application process for the TAP program as part of the DeKalb County School website?
This was a new program, and this was an individual who had been laid off from his job that I thought was an outstanding person. And he may or may not qualify for the TAP program, Teach Alternative. I didn't know. That was the only way I didn't go to the person and personnel. I went to the one person that works for me, the superintendent. I hope they have the courage to let me know that, you can't tell me what to do. You can recommend whoever you want, but ultimately I'll make the decision.
After the critical SACS report in March of 2012, what did you do to attempt to come off of accredited on advisement?
Find out what do we need to do to meet those requirements so that we could get full accreditation. That's exactly what I attempted to do. And I went directly to the superintendent and asked her, and we started putting together a list of our accomplishments and everything that had been happening in the system. I dealt with the superintendent and the person she would designate to work with us on that thing, Miss Ramona Tyson. Those were the only two people I had access to.
I'm not asking about the list of accomplishments that y'all put out in the public domain to try to justify what y'all were doing as a system. I'm asking you what you were attempting to do to come up with the accomplishment of the required action items. You've already testified you didn't agree with one of them in terms of the adoption of a nepotism policy. Were there any others that you didn't agree with?
See, I don't know why you choose to. I embraced all of the required actions. I said I believe each one of them, if we would realize them, would make us a better system. What I told you, I didn't agree with the so-called findings in the SACS report, especially the one that mischaracterized me as somebody trying to get a job for a board member. So I didn't have no problem with the directives. I had serious problems with the content of the SACS report, still do.
Okay. Well, let's move off of the January 2011 and the March 2012, we'll call those warning shot SACS reports. Let's focus on the October 2012. Your system is placed on accredited probation. You are one step away from having a loss of accreditation. At that point in time, what did you, as the then chairman of the board, do? At that point, it's not saying there's a forest fire coming. The house is on fire at this point. What did you do? What actions did you take?
Immediately met with the superintendent. Asked her to name the one person in the system I thought was most qualified to direct us in this activity, Ms. Tyson. Started meeting with my board members, every one of them, calling them, started talking to citizens on the Chamber of Commerce, elected officials, state representatives, asking them for their input on how we could proceed in this important endeavor. How should we proceed? We had to get somebody in governance. There was no issue about nepotism to me. That wasn't the primary focus at that time. The primary focus was to get, they called us dysfunctional. They were saying that the board didn't get along. So I wanted to find somebody that could help us in our governance. And we talked to a number of different so-called consultants. And we narrowed on one group that we thought could help us. So I immediately began doing that. And I also started writing those emails to members of the board, telling them where I was, what I was doing, asking for suggestions and input, because this was an extremely important thing for us to do.
All right. You mentioned that the board, they had identified that the board was dysfunctional. You had also testified on direct examination that you were undergoing mediation with Dr. Elgard. About what time period did that mediation occur with Dr. Elgard?
We had been mediating with Dr. Elgard before that time. We met with Dr. Elgard after we got that August 28th letter. And we met with him after he placed us on probation. That's when we met with him, after he placed us on probation.
For mediation?
It wasn't a mediation. We met with him prior to that, way before then, last year. In time, we didn't meet with him in mediation after we were placed on probation. We met with him to talk about whatever assistance he could give us as we work to try to meet those required actions he had placed on us.
Who was your predecessor as school board chair?
Tom Bowen.
Did Tom Bowen set up those mediation sessions with Dr. Elgard?
We had it done through our secretary for the most part, I think.
But it was under his administration that the mediation sessions were set up.
Right, we had one under mine.
So it would be fair to say that you actually ended the mediation sessions with Dr. Elgard?
No, we never did end them. We thought we didn't have any more, but we never did end them. We talked to Dr. Elgard, and we never did have a formal statement that we were ending these type of mediations.
All right. After the system is placed on accredited probation, you get the report. I think the October visit report is released in December of 2012. At that point, you get notification that you're going to have to go before the State Board of Education and justify whether or not you should be allowed to continue as a member of the school board. Isn't it true that at the State Board of Education meeting, the February hearing, prior to the recommendation that you be removed that went to the governor, counsel for the Department of Education identified 11 DeKalb County school system agendas covering 8 different calendar days occurring between January 23rd, 2013 and February 11th, 2013, and there was only one agenda item that you were able to identify that was devoted to addressing even a single SACS issue in the loss or in the accredited probation report.
I'm not aware of that.
All right. It's in the record, Your Honor. At the February 18th meeting, the last meeting that you had, I believe, before you were removed as a board member, isn't it true that you adopted or signed the conflict of interest provision only after one of the new board members brought it to your attention?
I'm not aware of that either. We were committed to doing this. So all we needed to do was to see the policy. What do you mean? We only decided to do this when we got new board members?
I think your testimony before the State Board of Education was we probably would have forgotten to adopt it at the February 18th meeting if the new board member had not brought it to my attention. Wasn't that your testimony at the State Board of Education?
I don't recall. If you say, I don't have questions about it, because all of our board members tried to stay alert and bring to our attention whatever it is we needed to do. So I wouldn't doubt it.
Wasn't one of the main criticisms of the local Board of Education in both the grand jury reports, the SACS reports, and in the questioning from the State Board of Education, the amount of legal fees that the DeKalb County school system was incurring?
They ask us questions about our legal fees. And SACS and the grand jury were external to the situation that was going on in the school system. All they could do was express their opinion. We don't feel that the legal fees were excessive and out of line with what we need to do in the system to take care of system business. We figure that the case with Heary was a necessary case. We figure that the way we hired our attorneys was done in a very appropriate and professional manner. So, they ask us opinions about them, they express their opinions, and we accept their opinions. That's the grand jury, and a lot of what they said, they didn't have the information we had.
Isn't it true at that February hearing before the State Board of Education that you were unable to even approximate how many different firms you paid on a regular basis for legal work?
Yes.
You were on the DeKalb County School Board
I
at the
still
time.
can't tell you that because we have attorneys doing different things. I don't make that assignment. The attorneys that we have make those assignments.
So as a member of the school board, or at the time that the system was placed on accredited probation, you didn't sign off on contracts for legal services?
No, not all of them. We sign off on contracts for somebody to be in charge of legal operations, and depending on what the case, they're the ones who form out the work to whoever the expert was in those areas, and we didn't know that.
I'm not asking about a subdivision of assignment in a case. I'm talking about general legal counsel, human resources counsel, the Heary litigation, and the workers' compensation work. You didn't hire as a board.
Right, and we paid them a set
of
amount of money. We paid them a set amount of money. How much they had to pay people working on special things within those areas, I do not know.
Okay, so the grand jury and SACS are wrong because they were external and they weren't aware of what was going on in the system. But it's your testimony today, is it not, that you inside the system also didn't really know what was going on and still can't identify today what was going on and who was doing work for the DeKalb County system?
No, my testimony today is that we hired those attorneys and paid them and depended on them to hire whatever attorneys they needed to help get the work done that needed to be done. And we think that the pay we paid them was reasonable.
But you will concede that both the grand jury and SACS criticized the amount of legal fees that the DeKalb County school system was incurring.
Yeah, it's just amazing to me that you don't seem to place any value on what the school board was doing. We were taking care of the business of the county, and we had to have attorneys to do that. And we went through what we think was an above-board procedure and process to achieve that. And we had the attorneys in place, and there was no under-the-table activity with them. It was transparent and open. Certainly, you're going to have people who have different opinions about you should have had more or less of this. The grand jury said maybe we were excessive. SACS said maybe we were excessive. They're entitled to their opinions. I can't argue with that. But because they expressed those opinions, to me, don't make them that valid.
Would you say that your weighing those opinions is borne out in the fact that you've touted as one of the major things that you did after the system was placed on accredited probation was that you went out and hired the governance group with former Attorney General Thurber Baker?
I think it was a significant thing.
So after the grand jury reports criticized you for excessive legal fees and SACS criticized you for excessive legal fees, one of the first things that you go out and do is hire a governance group that is part of the McKenna Long firm here in Atlanta, incurring additional legal fees.
So what are you saying?
I'm asking, do you see a little bit of irony there that you've been criticized by both the grand jury?
Because of the criticism of the grand jury and SACS, we're not supposed to get the best people we think we need to help us? Is that what you're saying?
Your Honor, if I could have just a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Your Honor, I think we're done with this witness.
All right, redirect.
Just a brief redirect, Your Honor. Mr. Walker, if you would turn to Exhibit 15. And Your Honor, before I forget, I would like to go over the exhibits, the petitioner's exhibits that have been admitted into evidence.
Let's do that Friday.
Okay,
Let's get
that's
Dr.
fine.
Walker off the stand and let's go home.
Not a problem. So if you quickly turn to Exhibit 15.
As I told you before, we're not all as young as you are.
I'll take that. As my 17-year-old sits in the courtroom. Okay, so Dr. Walker, if you would look at this exhibit, would you tell me the year that your son was employed by the DeKalb County School District?
In the year of 2000?
Were you on the board at that time?
No.
And would you remind the court when you came onto the board?
2008.
And in the year, and your daughter-in-law was hired in what year?
1992.
And when she was hired, had she already married into your family?
No, she just married a year after I was on the board.
Okay, so they weren't even married until, is that 2009?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what would you tell us what year your brother-in-law, who's the athletic director, what year he was employed by the DeKalb County School District?
1986.
And in 1986, was he your brother-in-law that year?
Yes.
Okay. And your other brother-in-law, can you tell us what year he was hired into the DeKalb County School District?
1993.
And your niece, can you tell us, your first niece that's listed, can you tell us what year she was hired?
1995.
And your niece with the initials GJ, what year was she hired?
2000.
And your nephew with the initials BJ, what year was he hired?
2005.
And your granddaughter, what year was she hired?
2006.
And your niece with the initials SM, what year was she hired?
1996.
Now, did you ask any of your family members to quit their jobs because you were elected to the DeKalb County School Board?
No.
Would that have been something possible for them to do?
It never crossed my mind, but I don't think so. I don't see the reason why.
Now, I'd also like to direct your attention to Petitioner's Exhibit number 9. You testified earlier that you sent this particular letter to members of the school, to fellow members of the school board, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you send this letter after the school board had been placed on probation?
Yes.
In addition to, are there several things outlined in this letter, several steps that you took that are outlined in this letter in order to address the issues raised by SACS?
Yes, ma'am.
And would you go to the next to the last paragraph and quickly review that and tell us what some of those things were?
Well, of all the people we had talked to and heard about, this was the one that received the most commendations, and we felt strongly that what Dr. Elgard and SACS said we need to do, we should do to make us a better system, and we were totally committed to it. And I tried to rally the troops and let them know that we should go full steam ahead in trying to achieve this.
Okay. And you also state in this document that you believe you all should adhere to the advice of Dr. Elgard to help you achieve full accreditation. So even though you disagree with aspects of his report, were you still trying to work with Dr. Elgard in order to bring the DeKalb County School District back to full accreditation?
And we will continue to do that.
And if you would direct your attention to Petitioner's Exhibit number 7. Okay, and in this document, it lists some additional steps that you were taking to address the issues raised by SACS. Were these things that you had already put in place and were working on?
Absolutely, and we were appealing to SACS to try to be as specific as they could and helping us to come up with some goals that we could measure and that were attainable and realistic, and we could get them done in a time certain. We call them SMART goals. That was the appeal we made. The multiple statements without giving us something that we could frame and measure, I suggested it didn't serve us well.
Okay. So after you received that report in November, you continue to work diligently to try to bring the
Yes, ma'am.
district back to full accreditation. Okay. No additional questions, John?
Rick Ross.
No, Your Honor, but we would reserve the right to recall based on the documentary
Sure.
evidence from SACS and the additional testimony.
Sure. All right. Dr. Walker, you can have a seat.
Thank you,
Thanks
sir.
very much. I don't want to due to the late hour, I don't want to do a lot of rulings on the documents. What I want to do, Ms. Obiera, there's a couple of gaps in here. Let me just get this
Yes.
back to you, and with the volume, that's understandable that one or two gaps might occur.
Okay.
So why don't we just give that back to you and let you kind of review it tomorrow. And I look forward to seeing everyone at 10 o'clock this Friday, the 28th. in courtroom 2, which is the courtroom to the left. When you come in, you take a sharp left. I hope everyone has a safe trip home, and we'll see you on Friday.